welcome to Resilient Retail. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your brand?
Yeah, of course. My name is Juliana. I'm the director of Tokyobike here in the Americas. Tokyobike is a lifestyle bicycle brand. We started in Japan in 2002. And at the time that our founder started Tokyobike, there was nothing like it out in the market. It was either super high performance bicycles or super heavy steel frames that in Japan they're called mamachari, and they're pretty much used almost like as a community bike that's used by moms taking their kids to school and salarymen going back home after work, but nothing like Tokyobike, which was light, easy, beautiful, simple, just super minimal, a bike for what it is, just a bike. And so he decided he was going to make bikes, and there you go. And Tokyobike was born out of this concept that we have that we call Tokyo Slow, which is really all about being, it's not a speed thing, which a lot of people initially think we're talking about speed and going slow. People sometimes they ask us if our bikes go fast because they read about it slow. And yes, I promise they go very fast. It all depends on you and your own momentum. You build your own speed. That's the beauty of a bicycle. But really, as a mindset, it's how do we connect with our surroundings and with the people around us and with our cities in a much more meaningful way that you really can't do when you're on a bicycle, because you're there. It's you, two wheels, and your own speed and your own pace. So you see things differently, you smell things differently, you notice things that you would normally not notice if you're in a car or in public transportation or even walking, because I feel like when we're walking, our speed also is so different. And even the amount of land that you can cover on by feet or by bicycle is completely different. So we were kind of born from this concept of Tokyo Slow and how the bike is an extension of you, of your lifestyle, and how can you use this bicycle to really be there, be present, and do the things you love in a much healthier, more sustainable way.
Yeah, I could use some Tokyo Slow in my life for sure. Just thinking about how quickly I move through life, and not even in the speed way you're saying, but just like letting things kind of pass by. And I love how the brand is so centered around an experience rather than just a product. It's a product that comes with a kind of baked in experience, which then brings us into the retail side of the business, which Tokyobike has been retail first. You guys were only in stores, didn't even have an online store for a long time. And it seems like that was really purposely done by the founders of the brand. Can you tell us kind of about the ethos of the store strategy from the beginning of the brand?
Yeah, absolutely. So, from a product design perspective, even like going back to just the bike itself, we've always taken a very different approach to pretty much everyone in the industry at the time the Tokyobike was born back in 2002. I think there are a lot of brands kind of doing what we do now, and just in terms of the object, the bicycle as an object, not so much, Tokyobike as a brand, but just thinking of the bicycle for what it is. And we kind of took a step back and thought, let's look at everyone that the bike industry is not covering. Everyone who wants a bicycle and they're too afraid to go to a traditional bike shop because they're afraid to ask the wrong questions, or they are not familiar with a bicycle and what it does and how to use it. When you think about a multi-speed bicycle, and I'm not talking about 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm talking about like road bikes and all of that they cover, with so much being focused in performance and moving fast and just exercise. We realized there was a huge gap in the market. And so Tokyobike was really born for that person who wanted to be on a bicycle and didn't know yet. So a lot of our customers are first-time cyclists. They come to us not just because of the bike being more simple, more manageable, easier to service, and all of that, but also because we kind of created this, we wanted to create an environment that it was safe and it was welcoming to pretty much anyone. You
Yeah.
want a bicycle? We have it. You're welcome here. And so that's where retail first kind of came into the picture. We wanted to make sure that we created these safe spaces, but also that they were designed completely different to the experience that you have in a traditional bike shop. We can do that because we're a bike brand. We're not a bike shop. Where bike shops, traditionally you walk into a bike shop and there's so many different brands on the floor, kind of
Yeah.
like department stores in a way,
Yeah.
where you really need, and we value bike shops so tremendously. I think they're essential to our business, to our communities, to pretty much anyone. The fact that during the pandemic they were considered essential, it's just another stamp of their value in our
Yeah.
communities. But we wanted to do things differently because we're a brand. We're not selling multiple brands. So we wanted to make sure that Tokyobike had this space that really represented the brand. So our stores really are nothing like you've ever seen a bike shop being. You walk in, and most of every time I'm in the store and I hear someone coming in and being introduced to the brand, I hear them say, "Oh my God, this is the most beautiful bike shop I've ever been to."
Hmm.
And we're not so much just trying to, make a beautiful space, but also make sure that our product is elevated, is displayed in a different way. Even the other accessories and products that we carry by other brands, we try to make sure that they also get sort of a podium place in the store. So you probably have walked into a bike shop. You usually have a wall full of locks
Yeah.
and helmets and whatever else. For us, we curate the products that we carry. So we really believe in the products that you see on our website and in our stores as being the best of the best. And because we source and curate them to be a smaller range of products, we can then display them in a much more unique way than you would be able to when you have so many different brands and styles and all of that. So instead of carrying 10 locks, we carry 3 because they're the 3 that we believe in, and they all have different purposes. So functionality also is a key thing that's always been, even on our own product, but making sure that any of the other products we carry sort of carry the same aesthetic and functionality that we try to do with our own.
Yeah, and being in Colorado, and just this past year I got into mountain biking, and so I know that experience like very firsthand. I did not grow up on a bike. I was not allowed to ride a bike in college because I was too prone to injury, and that my coaches always thought I would fall, which was probably the correct assumption of it. And I remember going and trying to buy a bike the first time, and it was like the questions I was getting, I was just like, I don't even know what you're asking me. Like, do you like these discs or these discs, or what kind of like gears do you want? And it was just like, I'm just trying to ride a bike somewhere. I think something I want to point out to the audience is a lot of times entrepreneurs look for kind of market holes in product. But something we're seeing is that there's also a lot of holes in experience. And even though the product, yes, the product is very different and it's unique and it filled a place in the market, it's also the experience around that product that was missing, of somebody who knows nothing about bikes doesn't really want to walk into a store and feel right away like, oh yeah, I really know nothing about bikes. And I think that's what's so cool about Tokyobike and the stores. Listeners, go look up their stores because they are beautiful. I can't wait until one day I can go in when we can all travel and see each other again. So obviously there was this focus on the experience, and that's a huge piece of it. That's a huge reason why you started in retail. And then at some point you guys realized, okay, we have to move online. At what point did you realize it'd be such an important piece of the puzzle for the brand?
So our first retail was really in New York City, our pop-up store. And with that pop-up, what we wanted to make sure is that as a first time entry in the US, we had never been out of Europe and Asia. At this time, we already had quite a large footprint in Europe. London, we had 2 stores at the time. Berlin, Milan, we're already kind of setting our ground in Europe, but in the States we didn't have anything. So we figured, you go big or you go home. Let's get a really busy corner in Soho and let's open a retail store. And that corner was really amazing because not only we were on the bike path and getting all the foot traffic in New York City, but we also had all these different tourists that were coming to the new museum, which was right across the street,
Oh
or just
yeah.
shopping in Soho. What started happening was, hey, I live in Chicago. How can I get a bike?
Mm,
And that was all done via email. We send you a credit card authorization form, you fill it out, small business, learning, growing pains kind of thing. And we did it. We did it for about 6 months until we were like, this is not sustainable. We
yeah.
can't. If we want to have presence in the states as a whole, we need to be able to be more present to everyone. We can have a retail store everywhere. It's not it would require a lot of capital, whereas we're still a pretty small brand. We're independent, we're privately owned. So it's not like we can just go and open stores everywhere. But
Yeah.
also with opening stores everywhere, you also want to make sure that you're offering that experience like you talked about. Everywhere you go, you have to be able that store will speak
Yeah.
your language and
And
talk
that's
to
really,
your
really
customers.
hard to do. Yeah.
It's really hard. And so that's when our first website was born. And it was amazing because all of a sudden we didn't need those emails anymore and anything. But then we started learning that we had other challenges. Buying a bicycle has always been traditionally done in person. So, how do you change the consumer behavior and their trust on a product that they're buying and they might have never seen it before? Not everyone came to New York City and test rode a bike and then went home and decided to buy a bike. We noticed we were getting a lot of first time customers that were just purchasing online,
Wow.
blind, just full
Yeah.
trust on what we were doing. And that's when we kind of realized that slowly that started taking a bigger chunk of our business instead of physical retail. And I think this is where, you know, talking back to how New York, even retail in general, physical retail has changed so much in the past few years. We noticed that our stores started getting less foot traffic and our website started getting a lot more traffic.
Mm,
Even New York City customers, because we extended that pop up. That pop up was there for 6 months, and then we opened a permanent store that was in the same location for about 4 years. And we realized that even for New York customers, they were buying online without have never been to the store before, because we keep track of every customer that comes in and test rides. They fill out a form. We know their information. We know what they rode. So if they buy something, we can connect those two dots. But we realized we were getting people that had never ridden a bike before. And, maybe they've been to the store, but they had never actually physically got their body on top of a Tokyobike before.
yeah.
And when we started seeing that shift, we realized that we had to start thinking differently about our physical retail, almost as an extension of e-commerce instead of the other way around. The website
Oh,
should take priority, and then the physical retail should be servicing as more of a destination where you can go and experience the brand and get the full picture of what Tokyobike is about. And if not, go to your local bike shop, which we work with a few bike shops around the country. Go there and be able to experience the product itself in a different way. But e-commerce has just completely shifted the way we run our business, especially here in the US. But it has also been incredibly key throughout this pandemic, right? Where we've seen numbers of e-commerce just grew, just a huge hockey
yeah.
stick growth for where we were in 2019 and where 2020 has taken every single online store, right? We're seeing growth everywhere. So it's been, for us, we've been very lucky that we had sort of already shifted our mindset and set the business up as this like e-commerce first, and
Yeah.
then physical retail kind of being there just as a supporting role.
Yeah. I think this is the question that a lot of brick and mortar first retailers and store owners are trying to figure out now, which is Tokyobike was kind of centered around this experience. The brand is an experience. The bike is an experience. Going into the store was an experience. And now all of a sudden you're trying to shift that physical, visceral experience online, which is very difficult. And obviously you guys were able to do it really well. On top of that, I feel like so much of e-commerce is kind of the, you're scrolling Instagram and you see an ad and it's a t-shirt and it might cost $40. You can kind of just buy it on the fly. But your bikes are running, hundreds of dollars into the thousands. This is not just a quick purchase. It's something that takes a lot of thought from the consumer, a lot of decision making, multiple touch points. And that's a really difficult experience to replicate. You can get that online with or in person with a one-on-one conversation. Really hard to replicate that online. How did you guys start to build that e-commerce experience that still felt so true to the brand so that you could get people to, purchase something that before they had never been purchased online?
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's the one gap that I see with e-commerce right now is the challenge of replicating that in-person experience. Not so much of you working with someone who can help you and answer your questions, because that's easily done, right? We have live chat on the website. We take video calls. We do all of the things that you can do from a digital perspective to really help our consumers. But when it comes to actually getting someone, it's really funny. Like, I think of this comparison. If you walk into a physical retail store, you can immediately get a sense of what that brand is all about. Yeah. You get the sense of design aesthetic. You get the sense of their product. You test the product, you touch it, you feel it, you smell it. Online, if you land on my homepage, how can I make sure that that first time you land, if you've never known anything about Tokyobike, will give you this understanding of who we are as a brand? We're more than just a bicycle. Like, we even joke, it's like our bikes could potentially sell themselves because they're these beautiful objects, but we're not selling a bicycle, we're selling a lifestyle. We want people to ride bikes. Yeah. We want more people on bicycles. That's really our goal as a brand. It doesn't matter, at the end of the day, I'm selling a product. Of course, I want you to be my customer. But if you're going to buy a bike, good for you. Get out there, ride a bike. That's all I care for. But how can a website, which, you have to hope that people will click in the right place and land at the right place so you can actually tell your story. And it's a really challenging thing. I think we're still trying to discover all the upgrades and changes that we can do. I think the digital version of Tokyobike is somewhat different to the in-person version, where I know exactly what my retail store looks like at all times, and I know the process and how a customer is going to move inside that space. Online, I have no control.
Yeah. So many different buyer journeys that can possibly happen.
Yeah. So many. And then how do you get them to even go from a product page to just a content page, which, content is such a big part of us as a brand. How do you get them to go there to then fully get a sense of who we are as a brand? It's really challenging. I find that I'm always in the search for what's next. How can we improve this? It's an ongoing process. It's just never just, what it is.
Yeah. What do you think on your website is, maybe the couple most important things that you've done in that space of trying to build that brand recognition and story right when someone lands on the site? Is it product photography? Is it the content you write? What are those strategies that you've even kind of started to test as you have gone through that process?
Yeah, it's a lot of it has been done through photography. That's really where we feel like we can tell a story of, in a way, I look at Tokyobike as not as a bicycle company, but as a design brand that sells bicycles. And so we try to convey that design first message on everything that we do. But I don't know that we always succeed, very, very honestly saying. I think there's so much that sometimes can be left on the table. And again, it's just because of the e-commerce experience, right? You
Yeah.
can only go so far.
Yeah.
You don't have someone there just holding your hand as you're going through. So for us, content has always been a big part of what we do, and I think that's how we try to tie those loose ends and get the consumer to get the full experience. So, for example, we work with creatives all over the world on photographing our bikes in different parts of their own city, sort of telling their own story,
Yeah.
their story on their bike and how they move around and all of that. So that's kind of a big part for us. And then when the pandemic happened, we realized, we couldn't ask a photographer to go to their favorite businesses anymore, local businesses, because all of those local businesses were closed.
Mhm.
And we felt we had to shift. And how do we shift? We actually brought our consumer to the picture. We said, show us your Tokyo Slow. Let us know what your Tokyo Slow is. And for about, I want to say 10 weeks, I'm not 100% sure, that's all we featured on
Wow.
social, online, on our newsletters. It was all about our customer and their experience on their Tokyobike throughout what they were going through. Because all of a sudden, and you've probably read it somewhere, the New York Times did an article right in the beginning of the pandemic that talked about the fact that the bike was having a moment. And that wasn't
Yeah.
just Tokyobike, that was every single bicycle brand was having a moment.
Yeah.
And I think we all realized we're all inside. How do we get out there and do it safely? And the bicycle was a really good means for that. It was also a really good means in cities like New York, where so many people depend on public transportation. And no, you're not going to buy a car.
Mhm.
So, how can you go from Brooklyn to Manhattan if you have to? Or how can you move from one place to another and do it feeling safe? And that's when we started seeing there was an increase in sales and everything. But for us, it was let's get that customer to share their experience, because we're all locked in, we're all struggling with this. It's a really hard time for everyone, including us here, in our little Tokyobike space, as
Yeah.
me and my team. How can we get that customer to tell how they're surviving this moment on their bike? And it was probably one of my favorite content pieces that we've ever put together, which we didn't, our customers did.
Yeah.
And it was so special, and it completely changed the way we even think about content and really bringing our customer. We've always been a customer first brand, but how can we do customer first even on how we feature our own content? Because
Yeah.
if people are out there riding bikes, the chances that you're going to feel more comfortable as a first time cyclist or someone who maybe only uses their bike on the weekend, if you see someone doing it, you feel more comfortable and confident in doing so. And we really believe that that's a way that we can get more people riding bikes. Just,
Yeah.
show us how you're riding, show us what you're doing. And then from that, our mixtapes were born, because we realized, we're kind of tired watching TV. Music is such a big part of our lives.
Yeah.
How can we get our, amazing group of creatives that we have as friends and collaborators? How can we get them to make playlists for us so we can just, listen to that through the pandemic? And
Yeah.
that was also another really nice little content piece that we put together. Again, we didn't, they did. And we just sort of we basically looked at ourselves throughout this year as a platform where we can share what other people are doing and let that inspire other people.
Oh, yes. I am so excited you brought up those playlists, because I saw that today and it was immediately such a cool thing to me, because it's one, it's a very creative content initiative. Two, your customers were kind of helping you build it. And three, we're talking about how hard it is to create a visceral experience online. But those playlists give again that real sense heavy feeling of the brand, where now you're saying, okay, the brand has like a sound. It's very similar to like the brand has a smell or has a visual thing when you walk in. Another thing I just want to really pull out for the listeners, I think the number one question I get on content, especially from brick and mortar retailers, is like, how do you even know what kind of content to create? And this is such a good story, because a brand really honestly is defined by the experience your customer has with the product and with your company. And so just passing that torch on to your customers, one, is great for you because you're not having to build the content yourself. Two, you're able to feature your customers, which is building loyalty and a fan base and this like collective growth towards something. And then three, your customers are telling you exactly what they want to see from your brand. Oh, we want to see other people riding the bikes. We want to see how people are experiencing it. It's easily one of the best ways to create content. People have said like, oh, Kristen, you're great at creating content. And I'm like, no, I'm great at just copying and pasting what somebody has given me and giving them the right platform for it. That's what this entire show is giving a platform for somebody else to define this roadmap. And so I think it's such a good tactical tip that I want to make sure listeners, if you're a small business owner, that is a great thing you can do. Instagram, Twitter, any social media you're on, your website, leverage the people that you already have who love your brand. Now, you mentioned something that now we're going to get into, which is the pandemic. A lot of people who have come on this show had the opposite situation of things were closed. They were having a hard time selling product. They had to get creative with it. But Tokyobike had the other issue, which, everybody and their mother is trying to find a bike. I know that in Colorado Springs, bikes are still pretty much sold out to this day. What was that experience like to go through that process?
It was wild. I'm still trying to get, to get settled and figure out what's next. I feel like we're constantly swimming against the current right now, and it's not it in a very fortunate and thankful way. But the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, we had no idea what was going to happen. I think like most businesses and small businesses, we started looking at our bank account. Yeah. How long are we going to be closed? How are we going to do this? And for us in particular, the way we fulfill our online orders, it's we ship your bike to a local bike shop that then assembles your bicycle so that bike rides as it should, feels like it should. It's not actually building a bike. And I'll take advantage of the platform you're offering me right now to tell people, yes, we might all be able to put a bike together, or we think we can, but it's an art. There's engineering to it. That's why bikes have to be approved. And you go through an entire process of making sure that frame can hold a certain weight and can work in a specific way. And that's why we work with bike shops, and we appreciate the work that they have, because the work that a mechanic does on your bicycle is essential. It's essential to make sure that that bicycle is safe for you, because that's the other thing that I don't think we associate immediately, because bikes are I think we all have that association of the first time we were on a bicycle.
Yes.
Every time I get on a bike, I get that same feeling of freedom, of excitement. And so when you're a child, you're not thinking of how safe something is. You're just doing it, right? You're just learning. You're moving as you go. And especially now that I understand exactly how a bicycle works, I'm like, oh, you need a mechanic. You should not be doing this. So definitely, have your bicycle assembled by a professional bike shop. Have it tuned up by your bike shop once or twice a year. Like, follow the steps. It deserves some love. It's not an object that will, just you can do whatever to it.
Yeah.
So anyways, but back to your question.
You mean that all of the times I've jumped off my bike on a downhill and kind of thrown it into the bushes probably needs some love after all?
Just a little bit.
Just
not necessarily.
Little
I wouldn't say not necessarily right there, but it does need some love. We take our cars to get serviced. We go to the doctor to get our annual checkups. Your bike deserves the same kind of love. Yeah. And please pump your tires often. They are not, you really need air in those things. Yeah. Anyway, but to answer your question, we kind of, started looking at, okay, this pandemic happened. What do we do? Bike shops are going to have to be closed because everyone's shutting down. How are we even going to have these bicycles assembled by professional bike shops? Yeah. And we we luckily very quickly, many of the cities and states decided that bike shops should be considered essential, and they are.
Yeah.
Like we discussed, they are essential for many reasons. They're core to communities, and that's why so many neighborhoods have different bike shops, because there's the service they provide is very much needed. But we're like, okay, one thing behind us, we have bike shops, they're open, we can still fulfill orders. UPS and all their freight companies that we use, they're all still working. Okay, good. We tackle this. But now, how do we make sure that people actually want to buy a bike? And luckily, like we discussed, bikes had a moment, they
Yeah.
took off. But then we hit a really big issue for us, especially as a small brand, which was supply chain.
Mm.
We had X amount of bikes made and planned to be made for 2020. And we sold out of half of those bikes in 2 months.
Wow.
And we're like, okay, what do we do now? We have
Yeah.
no inventory. I literally we closed our retail store because we had no inventory. We couldn't have people coming in. And so we started doing pre-orders, and that's pretty much what we're doing now. So every time I have a container coming in, that is pretty much all sold. And so we know when we start production, we open a pre-order, and then that gets sold by the time it gets here. So we're pretty much just now working against the clock. The problem is, to make a bicycle, you're dependent on so many other manufacturers.
Yeah.
One of our biggest suppliers for a big part of our components is Shimano, and they're having issues. They're back ordered by 12 months, which means I'm back ordered by 12 months.
Yeah.
So if you want a bike next year, it's going to take a really long time for you to get a bike. So I would say pre-order yours whenever you can. And that's not just me. It's every single bike company is facing the same issue. And truthfully, we don't think supply chain will be back to normal before 2022.
Yeah.
So we have another full year ahead of us where we're just going, just it's a day at a time. We're trying to deal with things however we can. I feel very lucky that, our business is thriving, but also because we've always had this customer first approach. It's really heartbreaking when our customers are disappointed because their bikes are late 1 or 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But it's not just we understand their frustration, because it's not 1 or 2 weeks. They already waited 4 months for that deadline that they were expecting.
So I'm curious too about these delays. It's something like you mentioned that there is this instant gratification that's been built into e-commerce. A lot of it comes from Amazon, the 2-day delivery and same-day delivery in some places, and that you can click and you're going to get something right away. And so this almost breaks that model of you get that instant gratification of the click and the checkout, but now you're having to wait quite a long time for the actual product to arrive. And not only that, with a bike, it's not just a product arriving, it's a whole experience arriving. It's access to something that you previously didn't have as you're buying a bike. How do you guys communicate with your customers during those long times to make sure they're still, connected to the brand, excited about the bike coming, even if it's a long time, and really getting themselves ready for receiving it? How do you make sure that they stay happy in that process?
Yeah, it's really challenging, and we've had to, with every pre-order chunk or delivery, we've had to adapt and learn from previous mistakes and do it better. So our first pre-orders, which were, I want to say, April last year, we took the approach of, these bikes are going to be here in 30 days. We can just communicate by the time the bikes are shipping, just keep our, the same process that we have always taken. And all we very quickly realized that was a big mistake, because if you're going to have someone wait for something, you have to have a very open channel of communication with them, so they know that you didn't just grab their money and ran, but
Yeah.
instead you're working throughout the process. So we quickly implemented different email flows to make sure that our customers were keeping up to date. So there's something they get when they place their order, something they get halfway through the period, something once the production is finalized, as soon as it ships from the Taiwan port, as soon as it lands in Long Beach, as soon as it gets to our warehouse, as soon as it ships to the final destination. While that seems like a lot of communication, we added every single one of those steps based on how we were getting feedback from our customers. So really growing in this process from customer feedback, that's all we could do. And, I before Tokyobike, I've had so many times when, something went wrong and you contact a company and they tell you, we'll make sure we use this in the future so it doesn't happen again. And I've always thought, why do I have to be the person who's giving you this? And I completely understand now how important that piece of feedback is. And we've also learned that some of our most frustrated customers became our best representatives, because they went through that process with us and understand that we're actually coming from a really good place.
Yeah.
And we want them to write. We are actually doing the best we possibly can to make sure that they're writing. And, there's probably other things that we can do to even do it better. But again, we're learning as we go. We weren't prepared for this. We have to adapt, and luckily our customers have been very open in accepting our growing pains as we move.
Yeah. I mean, this being the final interview of Resilient Retail Season 1, you just hit on a point that I think is the biggest theme that's come out of the whole season, which is every business has gone through absolutely unexpected things. And so customers are having to kind of shift and understand when things change. But the way to get through that is to remind your customers that there are human beings on the other side doing everything they can and really trying to get the success to the customer. People just want to buy from other people, right? We want that human connection. We want to know that this isn't some entity that's taken my money and it's like now behind a black box. There really is, there's Juliana on the other side who is trying to make sure you know every step of the way. And that is just so powerful and wraps around at the beginning of our conversation of your brand is not just a product. It's everything else. It's the engagement with the customer. It's the conversation. It's the problems they get solved. It's the experience that they have. It's the email they get when it's shipped. All these little things just come into, it's about engagement, right? And it's about human to human commerce. And I think that's kind of the best note to end this interview on and the season. Like, you just teed me up for the most perfect podcast ending ever. So thank you for that. I just love that message so much of even when things are so tough and so unexpected, if you're just open and honest with your customers and giving them the engagement and taking their feedback and listening to it, there's so much that people are willing to forgive because they want the experience they came for and they love the brand and they gave you your money. So they're going to be happy about that. So final question, and I'm like almost tearing up having to ask this for the last time in 2020. But Juliana, what does resilience mean to you?
I would say, I think, the biggest learning I had this year, and I think it summarizes what I think being resilient means, is just being able to adapt. We've had just don't be afraid to make changes and make mistakes, because that's how you learn. To be limited to being so afraid of doing something for, I'm a perfectionist. I'm a Virgo. So that
I'm a perfectionist too.
That tells a lot right there. I want every single thing that I do to have the best possible outcome. And it doesn't always happen. And like I said, we've had to adapt and we made mistakes. We tripped along the way and we came up stronger on the other side. So I'd say it's just, don't be afraid of making those mistakes, because those mistakes actually take you somewhere. So I'd say it's just, being resilient is just being able to be adaptable as much as being accepting and accepting of any mistakes you make along the way and just learning from them, because that, if you don't make a mistake, you really don't know what comes out on the other side.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Yeah, I love that. And I am so honored to have you on the show. So happy to kind of wrap this season with your story, because it's one of such like raw honesty and hope and experiential retail, which we're going to see just grow more and more in the future. And I'm so excited to have you on the show, and so excited for all of the amazing things that have happened to your business this year, and for the mistakes you guys hit and the roadblocks you were able to get through. So thank you so, so much, Juliana, for being the last interview of season 1 of Resilient Retail.
Thank you for having me. It was such a pleasure. And yeah, come whenever you can travel again. We'll be seeing you in LA.
Oh, yes.